Chapter 16. A half moon shone through the parting clouds, revealing 4 riders galloping toward them. Joseph pulled Dinah's colt from his belt, his pulse pounding as he turned to her. "Here." She snatched it from his outstretched hand, and he drew his Schofield, striding past Tony's body and the shrubs scattered around them. He positioned himself between Dinah and the approaching riders. That hat, that horse, the man in front had to be... "Lawrence!" Dinah cried behind them as the manhunter reined in his mount. Joseph's fingers shifted to the trigger, and Lawrence put his hand on his holster. "Hand her over, Gray. I won't ask again." 2 riders lined up on Lawrence's left, Mercer on his right. Joseph glared at Mercer's sneering face, fighting the temptation to blast a hole in it. "Wait," Dinah panted, limping forward to stand at Joseph's side. "Don't shoot. Joseph saved my life." Lawrence's hostile expression softened. "It sure is good to see you alive, Miss Hance." "How'd you find me?" she asked. "Your doctor friend came to us in Beaver. Said the gang had taken you out to the dunes to kill you." "Dr. Hart?" she exclaimed. "How'd she get away?" He shook his head. "Something about chloroform." The knot in Joseph's chest clenched tighter. It wouldn't be long before Sal found out Dr. Hart had escaped, if he hadn't already. And that meant the gang would be out looking for her. Looking for him. They'd want to warn him in case the posse showed up. Lawrence cocked his head, studying him. "I never thought you'd turn on him." "I know you've got no reason to trust him, but he killed one of Sal's men to protect me, and there's a body to prove it," Dinah told him, pointing behind her. "So what?" Mercer said. "He's a thief and a killer, and I say we give him the death he deserves." Joseph glanced down in surprise as she stepped in front of him. To defend him. "Much as I'd like to," one of the men admitted, "we're the law. If we don't keep it, we're no better than he is." Lawrence nodded. "Well said, Badger. We'll bring him in alive, as we ought." "You're outnumbered," Dinah reminded him. "There's still 6 of them left. Joseph can help you." "I ain't offering," Joseph growled, miffed that she'd spoken on his behalf. She glared at him. "Do you want to get pardoned or not?" A war raged inside him. He felt like a leaf being tossed about on the breeze, torn in 2 directions and falling fast. Of course he wanted a pardon, but he wouldn't turn traitor to get one. "A man doesn't change overnight, Miss Hance. Don't forget what he is. Why you're here," Lawrence warned. "Enough talk." Mercer drew his revolver. "Step aside, Miss Hance." She didn't budge. "Look!" exclaimed the young man next to Badger. He pointed behind him, and Lawrence twisted around in his saddle. Joseph stepped to the right to see past the posse. Some 100 yards south, at the crest of a dune, a man sat on a pale horse. Joseph's heart jumped into his throat. Sal wasn't alone. 5 riders were with him. "It's the gang," the young man cried. Lawrence turned to Joseph. "Get her out of here." Mercer gaped at him. "What?" "But now," Lawrence ordered, silencing Dinah. He wheeled his horse south. "Ride with me," he told his men, and he galloped toward the gang as they charged down the dune. Joseph sprinted to Steele and Cardinal, snatched Dinah's hat from the shrub it had snagged on, and brought the horses over to her. "Come on." She hobbled to Cardinal's side. Joseph pushed her hat onto her head and lifted her into the saddle. As he strode to Steele, he cast a glance south. 3 riders had separated from the rest of the gang and were heading straight for them. "Marcus." Heart pounding, Joseph sprang onto Steele's back and pointed him north. "Follow me," he said. And she did, staying close on his heels as they raced across the sand, gunfire ringing out like peals of thunder in the night. They loped side by side through a moonlit wilderness, 10 miles between them and the dunes they'd left behind. Stars glimmered through gaps in silver-lined clouds. A restless wind stirred the grass. Joseph gripped the reins so tight his hands had gotten stiff, clenched his jaw so hard it ached. He'd done the right thing. Sal had gone too far this time, making him kill an innocent woman to prove his loyalty. Something's broke inside him. Still, an accusing voice whispered, "Traitor. Murderer." Tony hadn't left him any choice, but they wouldn't understand that. None of them would accept that he'd chosen Dinah over one of their own. Gus and Rick, they'd want him dead for what he'd done. Joseph looked back, scanning the rugged hills to the south. He couldn't see the riders who chased him out of the dunes. Hadn't for a while now. He didn't know who was with Marcus. He hadn't let them get close enough to tell. Dinah held onto the saddle horn with her free hand. shoulders slouching and a grimace on her face. She seemed awful uncomfortable, exhausted and struggling to keep her balance. Joseph didn't have to check his pocket watch to know it was nearing midnight, but they couldn't stop yet, not till they crossed the Cimarron River. For the last hour, he'd been racking his brain for a place they could lay low for a week or two, but every hideout he knew of, Sal had shown it to him. One option had come to mind, somewhere Sal had never been, that he wouldn't even know existed. Returning to Obadiah's was about as risky as riding back into Abilene to rescue Nieto, but it would bring Dinah close to home. And I ain't staying long. Suddenly, there came a sound like distant drum beats, fast and faint, breaking the monotony of Steele's hooves crunching through the grass. Joseph glanced over his shoulder, his gaze sweeping across the dark horizon. He didn't see anything, but the rhythmic pounding kept getting louder. There, 3 shadows charged over a rise some 200 yards behind them. "Oh no," Dinah breathed. "Come on," he said. "Let's beat him to the river." He spurred Steele into a gallop, and Cardinal sprang forward to match him. The wind rushed against his face, howling as they ran across the open plain. Joseph leaned low over Steele's stretched neck, the Mustang's black mane flying and his ears flattened against his head. Cardinal splashed through a puddle and stumbled. Joseph's heart skipped a beat, but Dinah didn't lose her seat. Quickly righting herself, she thrust her hands forward and urged him on. Joseph looked back and muttered a curse. They ain't given up the chase. 2 miles slipped by in a blur, and as they neared the Cimarron River, Steele slowed, his breaths coming hard and fast. "Come on, boy, give me a little more." The stallion surged with another burst of speed. Cardinal's eyes were wild, his nostrils flaring as his hooves thundered beside Steele's, trampling the tall grass in their path. The eastern current ran strong with fresh rainfall, glittering in the moonlight. Joseph reined in Steele, and Cardinal skidded to a halt on the river's muddy bank. "You go first," he told her. "I'm going to watch your back." Dinah gulped and stared at it. I don't think I can. There's no time to argue. Go." Her frightened gaze met his, and he added, "If anything happens, I'm right behind you." Dinah's face steeled with resolve. She took a deep breath and gave the gelding a kick. Cardinal bounded into the river, and the Mustang plunged in after him. Wading up to his shoulders, Steele pressed on, sloshing through the water and wetting Joseph's drying clothes all over again. He couldn't see under the surface, didn't know if the stallion's next step would carry them forward or drown them in quicksand, so he focused on what was in front of him, Dinah's back and Cardinal's tail, the northern shore drawing closer. Steele's stride faltered. Joseph fell forward onto his neck, panic jolting through him. "Joseph!" Dinah screamed as he slipped downstream. He lost all control, the Mustang's legs flailing in a frantic attempt to find his footing. "Don't stop," he shouted back at her. "Keep going." Steele planted his feet, and Joseph's boots went under the water. He looked down in alarm. "Quit fighting him, Joseph." Jeremiah's words came to him unbidden as he clung to the stallion's dripping mane. "It ain't about who's boss. You're partners. Trust the horse, and he'll trust you." Steele bellowed in distress, and Joseph patted his neck. "Easy, big fella. Take it slow." He nudged the Mustang's sides, giving him all the slack he needed. Steele snorted and took one step forward, then another. "That a boy." Pushing against the current, Steele fought his way back to Cardinal and Dinah, who waited right where she'd been when they got swept off track. She took her hand off the rope attached to her saddle and blew a big breath. A warm feeling thawed fear's grip on Joseph's heart. "I told you to keep going." "I didn't listen," she answered with a backward glance. Following her gaze, he spotted 3 riders galloping toward the river. "Yah!" Dinah cried. Cardinal leaped into action, and Steele charged after him. As they made a mad dash for the water's edge, Joseph expected bullets to whiz past his head, but they didn't. "Joseph!" Marcus called as Steele climbed up onto the bank. Joseph spun the Mustang to face him. "Stop running!" he shouted from the opposite shore, Gus and Remy on either side of him. "I just want to talk." "Talk?" Gus exclaimed. "After what he's done?" "I didn't want to do it, Gus," Joseph told him, knowing he wouldn't care. "Tony was my friend." Gus raised his rifle, but Marcus shoved it down. "All them years, Joseph. All we've been through," Marcus fumed. "Sal raised us as sons." Joseph grimaced. Marcus's words clawed at him, ripped him apart. "He's lost his way." "No, you ain't seeing clear no more. She's using you. You don't mean nothing to her." "He's stalling," Remy said, spurring his horse toward the water. "Let's get him." "No," Marcus barked. "We ain't chasing him no farther. We gotta get back to Sal." Joseph's shoulders relaxed, relief flooding through him. "He's letting us go." He gave Marcus a grateful nod, but the man he called brother made no gesture in return. Frowning, Joseph turned Steele around and headed north. Dinah fell in beside him. "I'm gonna kill you, Gray," Gus erupted. "You hear me? I'm gonna kill you." Joseph pulled his saddle and blanket from Steele's sweaty back and carried them over to his bedroll. He dropped the blanket in the grass and set the saddle at the head of his bedroll, as was his custom. Crouching, he opened his saddlebag, took out his brush, and trudged toward Steele with a sigh. He'd already unsaddled Cardinal for Dinah, despite her insisting she do it herself. She stood brushing him as Joseph approached Steele. How she was still on her feet after all she'd been through, he didn't know. Running the stiff bristles over Steele's silver coat, he swept away the dirty clumps clinging to his back, his strokes brisk and instinctive. It gave him something to do, something to focus on, but it failed to distract him from the crippling awareness that he was once again alone in the world, that he'd left the gang for good. His only friends, his family. Joseph brushed harder. "That can't have been easy for you," Dinah said. His hand paused. "No." Grass swished against his boots as he resumed his task, the air thick and damp in the aftermath of the storm. "What are we going to do now?" she asked. "There's a cabin on the plains, a few miles from Abilene." Joseph bent to brush Steele's belly. "You should be safe there." "You think the gang will come after us?" He straightened and moved to the stallion's hindquarters. Not you. Me. You heard Gus. The sooner you're away from me, the better." She frowned at him over Cardinal's back. "That's your plan? You're just going to keep running? From the gang? The law? Everyone?" "I've been running all my life, Miss Hance. You get used to it after a while." "All your life?" Dinah echoed doubtfully. "You weren't born an outlaw. You had to come from somewhere. What about your parents, brothers, or sisters? Don't you ever want to see them again?" Joseph huffed. His past was the last thing he wanted to talk about right now. But how else could he make her understand? "I left home when I was a boy." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" Joseph walked around to Steele's right side and turned his back to Dinah as he started brushing again. "My daddy was stationed at Fort Walker when the Yanks showed up. They killed him." It felt strange to talk about him, about the war. The early years of his childhood seemed like a dream, a life someone else had lived. "They took Buford, and then they took our house. My mama moved us to Charleston to stay with my uncle. But she..." He drew a deep breath. The knot in his chest made it hurt. "She was in a bad way. One morning, she got on a train. Didn't even leave a letter to say where she'd gone." "How old were you?" Dinah asked. Joseph gazed at the stars. He remembered lying under them on muggy summer nights, his mother telling him that God had made each and every one, that he called them all by name. 7. "What happened then?" she prompted quietly. "I met a man named Jeremiah. He just escaped from a plantation. Said he was going as far west as the trail would take him. That sounded swell to me, so I went with him and never looked back. It was just the two of us for a while, till we ran into Sal and Marcus." He lowered the brush and sighed. "So you see, Miss Hance, I ain't got no one waiting for me." Soft steps approached him, and he turned. Dinah was right in front of him, the two of them standing in the narrow space between their horses. Joseph's mouth went dry. "Life hasn't been kind to either of us," she said, "but I have to believe that I've suffered for a reason, that we met for a greater purpose than destroying each other." How could she say that? How could she see anything good in him? Feel anything but hatred? She wouldn't if she knew. If I told her everything. Joseph reached inside his coat and pulled the necklace from his pocket, the silver cross glinting in the moonlight. "The morning after we robbed the bank in Abilene, I met a stranger on the road. He mistook me for a decent man, insisted on giving me this, but it don't belong with me." Dinah's lips parted as she met his gaze, her eyes like mirrors, reflecting his pain, his shame. "I'm no more deserving than you are." She reached out and gently closed his gloved fingers over the cross. "He meant it for you. You don't have to prove yourself worthy of it." She withdrew her hand. Joseph stared after her as she limped toward her bedroll, still feeling the tender pressure of her fingers, wrestling with the notion of accepting something he hadn't earned. something he wasn't worthy of. There's no such thing as selfless, Sal once told him. Nothing is given freely. There's always a cost, conditions that must be met. Only a fool gives without expecting something in return. Early the next morning, they saddled up and continued their journey north, veering east to avoid the soddies scattered along the Jones and Plummer Trail. After what happened with the gunsmith in Great Bend, Joseph wasn't taking any chances. Rolling hills became rugged slopes with red flat-topped rocks rising all around them. Shrubs and sagebrush and cedar trees gathered near clear-running streams. When they paused to fill their canteens and let their horses drink, he noticed Dinah gazing up in wonder. They hit the trail again, winding through a narrow canyon with a jagged strip of blue sky overhead. He drew a deep breath of crisp air and settled into the routine rhythm of travel, listening to the crunch of Steele's unshod hooves on the gritty path, the wind whistling between the canyon walls. Out here, so far away from everything and everyone, he could pretend that his life hadn't been turned upside down, that he hadn't killed one of his friends. As they rode out of the canyon's shadow, Joseph squinted up at the noon sun. It was time to break for their midday meal. He picked a spot on a high treeless hill, reckoning that Dinah would appreciate its wide view of the surrounding landscape. He brought Steele to a halt and dismounted, giving his speckled neck a pat as she slid from Cardinal's back. They'd been in the saddle since sunup, their only rest a brief one, and she ain't complained once. Joseph rummaged in his saddlebag till he found a can of baked beans and his can opener. He sawed off the lid, took out his spoon, and joined her on the grassy hillside. Dinah sat staring at lush green plateaus and their rusty edges, her knees bent and arms braced behind her, her clothes splattered with the same reddish stains his were. Joseph scooped some beans from the can and studied the western horizon as he chewed. Wait. He glanced down at her again. Where's hers? His brow furrowed. You ain't hungry? I am. It's just... Dinah leaned forward and hugged her knees to her chest. That can of peas I had this morning was my last one. Oh, why didn't you say so? She shrugged and Joseph sat beside her. Here, he said, offering her the can and spoon. She looked at him in surprise, then shook her head. No, I can't take yours. Come on, he insisted. I ain't giving you all of it. We're sharing. Dinah's cheeks turned pink. All right, fine. She accepted the can and spoon and took a bite, her shy eyes avoiding his. Joseph shifted his gaze back to the horizon and stretched out one leg, propping his arm on the other. He didn't want her to feel uncomfortable with him, to think she couldn't ask for things. Can't have you slowing me down, he teased with a sideways glance. Dinah lowered the spoon and arched a brow at him. He smirked and her razor-sharp eyes twinkled. A smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Her eyes, green as a summer meadow with russet flowers blooming at the center. Joseph caught himself staring after she'd looked away. As she dipped the spoon into the can again, he said, You're tough as nails. You know that? A shadow passed over Dinah's features, her smile vanishing like the sun behind a cloud. I don't feel so tough. He swallowed, struggling to put it into words, tell her how brave, how special she was. All I'm good at is getting even, breaking faces and shooting folk. It ain't easy to show kindness to a fella who's done you wrong. You've got a strength in you I don't rightly understand. I pulled the trigger, Joseph, she reminded him. I could have killed you. You were defending yourself. Dinah drew a shaky breath and met his gaze. He smiled at her, wanting nothing more than to glimpse the sun again. Enemies, right? Her eyes brightened, a sheepish smile peeking through as she passed him the beans. Joseph awoke to the sound of distant thunder, a pale sky and gray clouds overhead. Wincing, he sat up, stretched his stiff neck, and glanced around the campsite. The fire had died. Dinah lay on the other side of it, her back turned to him, her blanket rising and falling with each deep breath. The horses stood nearby, heads raised and alert. Joseph frowned. There was no break in the thunder, no pause in the rumbling that drummed louder and louder. He grabbed his rifle and got to his feet, not bothering to put on his hat. He ran to the edge of the hill and peered into the basin below. A dark mass stampeded through the valley, heading north as gold rays split the clouds in the east. Buffalo. The herd wasn't half as large as the ones he'd seen roaming the open range in years past, but he was glad to see them again. He'd started to wonder if they'd all disappeared. Dinah limped to his side, winded and wide-eyed. "Oh," she breathed in awe. "I haven't seen him in so long." She grinned from ear to ear as she watched them, the rising sun casting an orange glow over her face and setting her hair ablaze. Joseph didn't dare move or breathe. There was something sacred about this moment, sharing this with her. He realized that he didn't mind it being just the two of them, that he'd rather spend his days with her than wander alone. He didn't want to leave her, or her to leave him, and it terrified him.